Hello and welcome. Today we are talking about impermanence and death as related to Tibetan Buddhism and applying it to our everyday lives. Now we first wanted to start off with a quote from the book, The 37 Practices of the Bodhisattva, the fourth verse, which is related to this topic. Now, the main theme of the teaching of death and impermanence is not to become attached to worldly possessions. The teaching of death and impermanence is one of the four thoughts which turn the mind from samsara, meaning that they get the mind ready to free itself from all the attachment in the realms of living, and thus bring us to nirvana. Our text states that one must be ready to give up life's concerns, lose relations, give up possessions, and finally let go of the consciousness that fills the body. See, in Buddhism, body is only a vessel. Your consciousness fills it. In class, we went over the allegory of the body being like a hotel. Your body is the hotel room, and the consciousness is like a guest. Eventually, the guest will check out and leave. We also talked about, on this note, that worrying about accumulating wealth and possessions is a useless pursuit, as it all goes away eventually. Now, we also wanted to go over the fact that life and death are seen as two sides of the same coin. The moment we're born, we begin dying, and without death, there cannot be life. So if something never dies, nothing can come take its place. So it's all a cycle, really. Speaking of cycles, the whole idea of samsara itself is cyclical. Things are always changing. Life gives way to death, death gives way to life. Since the future is unknown, there is always some form of evanescence. What was interesting, which we covered in class, is that Buddhist monastics are the most fearful of death. Now, we speculated a couple reasons. One is that maybe they fear this because they are afraid that they won't accomplish enough in this life to bring them closer to nirvana. The other is anxiety about losing the precious human life, fear of being born into a hell realm or something like that. Another point we went over in class is that lifespan is also unknown. So some Buddhist monks practice She Tar Gong Ba, sorry if I butchered that, which is the practice of liberating animals, which supposedly extends the lifespan of the practicer, and shows that even those who practice Buddhism are unknowing of their fate.
As we have alluded to before, there is impermanence in life as well as death. In life, there are such things as declining beauty, hence leading to us, especially females, buying beauty products to keep their age a secret, I guess, and keep looking as great as they once were and not accepting the change. There are also such things as high divorce rates, about 50% in the US, showing that even relationships can be impermanent. And there's also a lot of moving around with jobs changing, friendships being lost, and that shows the impermanence of how social life can be. We've also talked about death in the East versus the West. So places in the East, such as India and our Tibetan culture, people are publicly cremated, hence, as we saw in Varanasi. Also in the East, there's the idea of those who died next to the Ganges River go straight to Nirvana. Also in places in Tibet, there are sky burials where they use bodies, where the dead bodies are fed to animals such as vultures to allow the cyclical reincarnation to occur. So as we can see, death is very open in the East. However, if we move to the West, there are funerals and the cremations all happen behind closed doors. Death is more of a stigma and it's not very widely discussed. And the bodies, they are kept for show and are considered sacred, and they're basically kept as whole as possible before the possibility of a cremation. So we talked about death in scriptures. It's written in Buddhist scripture that everyone dies, and that's a given. No one lives forever. However, what we Buddhist monks and even those who practice the religion don't know is that when or how we will die. And that brings us, as we've stated before, that Buddhist monks end up fearing for their death. And also, when someone dies, all they can do is bring their good karma or bad karma with them. Nothing else can be brought once someone dies.
So reincarnation in Tibetan Buddhism is where the consciousness leaves the dead body and is transferred to a new one. And where you go depends on the karma that you built up. The whole idea with Buddhism is to stop this reincarnation. After a person dies, there is an intermediate state called bardo in which the soul experiences a variety of hallucinations as it attempts to find a new host. And it's debated on how long this lasts, but many people believe that it can last up to 49 years. Tulku was one of the first ways to keep power between the feudal lords, but it later developed to become a way to find new lamas, such as the Dalai Lama. And ways to find the Dalai Lama, ways to find the Lama are visions, dreams, signs, and notes left by previous incarnations, and have the potential Lama identify the belongings of previous Lamas, and then if they're recognized by the High Lama. Concerning recollecting death, having less worldly clinging increases your happiness, and not recollecting will lead to the pursuit of fleshy pleasures and moral corruption. So, with recollecting the death, one tries to develop good qualities and to purify one's faults.
Now we'll move on to talking about the main point of this presentation, is to show how these Buddhist teachings are incorporated into our lives. So we want to start off by talking about how these are incorporated into each of our own religious beliefs. So starting with Hinduism, I believe that it's one of the religions that shares the most in common with Buddhism because they both originated from the same area. Hindus share the idea of reincarnation just as the Buddhists do. However, there's no concept of bardo in Hinduism. Instead, we believe that when one dies, their soul lives in like a quasi-middle state or realm between heaven and the real world. And only when the family of the deceased performs a ceremony will the soul pass on to heaven, and then eventually a new body. Unlike Buddhists who do not believe in an eternal soul, Hindus believe in an Atma that is everlasting and non-fleeting. The idea of impermanence is quoted in the Hindu scripture, but it is more specifically stated that the impermanent nature of things is just an opportunity to gain what is permanent, such as making the Atma better. In my opinion, overall, I think if you're just a good person, you will be fine. I agree with the idea of change and impermanence because it brings about our ability to adapt to new situations. I believe life is more fun when we get to experience new and different things. Death can be hard, but the idea that I'll be reincarnated based on my deeds pushes me to be a better person. I also believe that I'll wake up every day, unlike some Buddhist monks do, and do not fear my death. Also, everything I do is to make my soul a better person, and I believe I'm on the right track to do so.
In Islam, it's believed that the man and the woman is a union between the body and the spirit, and that death occurs once the spirit leaves the body, and it's written in the Quran that death is inevitable and one cannot escape it. Once a person dies, the person is believed to be interrogated by angels in their graves, and based on the determination if that person was a righteous believer or a sinner, their soul will be put into hell or heaven, where they wait until the day of judgment with God. From that, on the day of judgment, God weighs on their deeds committed in life and determines whether they go to heaven or hell. In my opinion, I don't focus on death as leading to the day of judgment, but consider it to be the result of a biological deterioration of our bodies. But I do have the idea of death being inevitable in the back of my mind, and due to this, I try to live my life to the fullest with little to no regret. And with this comes along the idea of being respectful and kind towards others in order to improve my mental well-being.
So I'm an agnostic, which means that I really don't think about religion that much, but here's what I basically think about impermanence and death. So I have no idea what happens after death, but I really don't care. If there's an afterlife, I'll find out. If not, then it doesn't matter. I won't be around to mourn. I just try to live as good of a life as possible, and I believe that being good to others is the best way to live well. Money and also possessions aren't everything, but it does allow you to do some fun stuff. So having a comfortable amount of money and possessions, I think, is a good thing. Nothing really matters too much, in my opinion, because there's no spiritual backing behind it. So I think you just need to have a good life, have fun with it, and make your own meaning. So change is part of life. Roll with it. Death is nothing to be afraid of, so long as you secure the future of those dependent on you without you. And I think you should only hold on to that which is beneficial to your life, so good memories and good people.
Now we will touch a bit upon how death and impermanence plays in our everyday life. So we'll start off with our social life. So when we're with our friends, we believe that nothing we do has consequences. Being young adults, we think that we are invincible and thus engage in risky actions. However, one of my friends did get into a car accident and was bedridden for a full month, and this month taught him that nothing in life was forever, whether it be his life or the car he was driving. If we move on to how the university perceives life and death and impermanence, we talk about the idea of impermanence here, that nothing at the university has stayed the same in the past 200 years. We've had a president change. The prices of dining hall food have increased, maybe not the quality. New teachers have arrived, old teachers have left. And it just goes to show you that even something that has been as a great institution still has things that are added or taken away.
So applying impermanence to community values change. If we look at the civil rights movement of the 1960s, before in the South, I mean, segregation and discrimination were okay. But after the advent of civil rights in 1964, this was no longer the case. And then also looking at this city of Charlottesville specifically, it's drastically changed over its years, from 1819, when it was just a very small town with the building of the university, to where it is today. Now, looking at impermanence nationally, we talked about mostly social programs, so like retirement and pensions derive from the idea that certain parts of life have to come to an end, and the capabilities of man are not permanent. And then there's also the idea of life insurance, which comes with the underlying understanding that no one stays healthy and lives forever, and as such, preparations need to be made for that eventuality.
So overall, we have shown that death is certain, that nothing is forever. These are the two crucial teachings of death and impermanence, respectively. And once we recognize these two things in Buddhist beliefs, that we can be at peace with ourselves. Hence, we have completed another thought of the mind, and we are one step closer to freeing ourselves from samsara.
A couple questions we have were, how does the overlying idea that one must be ready to give up relations impact family dynamics? Also, knowing life is impermanent and death is inevitable, would one want to live life to the fullest extent, or would one be content living by following steps and paths laid out for them by society?